Hello, and welcome to the second video on the CSS feedback tracking database. This database has a lot more features, and it will be explained in this video. In addition, the comment section below has the video segmented into parts due to the extent of how many features this database offers. With that being said, you can browse through that at your leisure, and let's get started on talking about the database.
Section 1, Overview.
Okay, so this is the main screen. As you can see here, not much has changed since the last database. You still have an area to put your group name as well as some information, and you can do so here in the portal information screen under the options, and just fill that out for wherever you work. So I'm going to put 374th Medical Group as always, and then any information that I'd like to put, I would put this as a test. And there is two things to this. There's a normal announcement, which makes the screen look like that, or if you really want to get people's attention, you could highlight it and it makes it orange, as you can see there, if it's something you really want everybody to know while using the database. It's just an added feature. It's up to you if you want to use it. Some of the things about this database, different from the other one, is that it self-corrects itself. There's usually a lot of problems that go along with access and stuff like that. So when you exit the database, you will know that it takes a little bit longer time to exit out of that database, but that's because it repairs itself and goes back to normal in case anything does stop working. So if something does stop working, just know that exiting and reopening the database should fix common errors. Also here, if you have any questions, you can click this and email me. So some of the features that add here is we have editable feedback forms, editable sponsorship forms to where you can put the information however you'd like, as well as a new area for Inprocessing and Outprocessing for when individuals come into the CSS. You have named tasks here that you can edit on. There's just 3 general areas. You can name them whatever you want, and inside that area you could name them again to let the individual know on a form what those check marks are for. It's entirely up to you if you'd like to use this area, and showing that will be it'll look like this. So that text you put there will show up, and then you can process somebody. This will be gone over more in the gains and losses, but yeah, that's about it for those features for overview. It does a lot more so than the other database, so just keep that in mind.
Section 2, Alpha Rosters. Alright, here we are at the Alpha roster, and you'll notice there's a couple new features. Over here we have a filtering area, which I'll explain, and I added a button for Erase Roster in case you want to do that. But I have my basic roster right here, just called Dummy Roster, and you just got to make sure when you pull your roster from Blisdom that you ensure that these titles are here on the top. These must be here, otherwise the importation will probably fail. It might not, but it'll just cause problems. So just be sure when you download your roster that these are the first lines. So with our roster, we'll just go into our database and you click Import Roster, then click Browse, and then wherever your roster is, mine so happens to be in my desktop, so we'll just go and find it for here for demonstration purposes. Yours would be a lot easier to find than mine, but here it is, our dummy roster, and then you just hit go, and then it does whatever it needs to do in the background, and then you X out of that, click home so it could refresh, and then go back into the roster, and then you'll see everybody's information in here. Some of the things you'll notice, like I said, you could still search manually. So I'm going to search for this individual, and it pulls him up when I hit enter, and only shows him. And these little icons here shows what fields you could search through. So if you wanted to search for specifically something, like anybody who is in a specific office, so SGOME, I pulled up anybody in SGOME. And the cool thing about these filters are when you email them, so if I email this as an Excel, it would open it up and it would put in that Excel the only thing that I searched for, which is anybody in SGOME. So it makes it really easy for you to edit. You might have to play around with the design a little bit because the database can't fix the design for you, but you get the point. You could also search by squadron, or not search, but sort by squadron. And as you can see here, I changed it to surgical ops, total 77 people in that squadron, and all of that information is shown up right there. So as you can see, all this information, by the way, this information is generated, it's not real, so don't do anything crazy with it. So with that, if I wanted to give dental their squadron information, you could also email that as well, hitting email and sorting by that squadron. You don't have to worry about these boxes if they will show your squadron or not. No matter what roster you put in, it already looks into a field, which is over here. It's called assign pass clear text, and it looks for the squadron and puts every squadron available in your roster into these boxes, so you can easily search for them without having to manually do it. Another thing, you can hit unfilter and go back to the main screen where everybody's at. You may see random redness where it says no supervisor. Check Blizdom. The database searches through your alpha roster that you import and upload, and it sees if a supervisor's name is not a name. It looks to see if it's a number or it's blank, and if it's one of those two, it will erase that and put this to emphasize that you need to check it. So some of the commonalities I've seen with that is that the individual's supervisor social was messed up and it was inputted into Blizdom wrong, causing an error to where it doesn't match to a person. So it just helps better management of that kind of thing in the database. And as always, if you want, you could export it and do stuff like that, but for the most part the alpha roster is very simple. It gives you the information you need and how you could sort for things on a go, and gives you that information that you need. And that concludes the information about alpha roster. Section 3, Gains Roster and the Sponsorship System. So jumping right into the Gains Roster here for Gains Roster, and you'll see that the menu looks similar to the alpha roster with a couple of exceptions with this date range here, as well as you still have the filter area, and we have an archive button, as well as hide and unhide columns. So same as before, we just check our Gains Roster here. I actually had to scale down this roster as the code I was making for the other roster was failing at the social. So in order to not make the database confused, this roster is going to be very basic, but as always, ensure these are on the top and all the other data looks how it would look on the Gains roster, and make sure you're uploading the right roster. So we go into our database, import Excel, and then we tell our database to go to the dummy roster for your Gains roster, and then you just hit go. And then as it does before, you hit X, go to home, and then open it back up, and your Gains should be there. So Gains is very significant in the database. It actually goes into two programs, which is the sponsorship program. So you'll see here it says assign sponsor, and these people are blank. So what you can do is if I were this inbound person, test 21, with that social right there, we're just going to call him Bob. So I'm going to assign Bob a sponsor. This section told me Senior Master Sergeant Bob 2 is going to be his sponsor. So I put that information in there. And why would I do that? Well, when you double click their name, it opens up a sponsorship form to where you can email individuals. So you could, again, as I went over in the overview, edit this information intricately to where you could put whatever you want. This is what the Yokota CSS wanted to do with theirs. So you could copy that or do something other than yourself, do something for yourself. you can see it'll talk about the inbound individual's name, his social, as well as the marital status, and report no later than date, and what squadron he came from, as well as various informations. You can either print this out or email it. The most easy option is to email it, and it's telling me it's greater than width that my settings are, which is fine. And it will email the roster as how it looked in the database. You won't get all these options, it'll just come right up for you. And that way, when they get this, they will see this roster and they can print it out and sign it for themselves. And it's just a great way to mass notify people for inbound sponsorship. And you can keep track of who you assigned and who you did not assign, to where that everybody gets the notification. And in order to generate this paper, you either click the social of the inbound individual or you click their full name. This date range here applies a date range to gains within a certain month. So if I were to say the 1st through the 30th, I wanted to see who's coming in. I have nobody, so that doesn't help me, but it will help you if you had a bigger roster and you wanted to know who's coming in at what time. The button for archived gains shows things that were past today's date. So if they processed before, that information is no longer useful to you. You just want to see who's coming up. That feature's still being worked on, so if there's any errors, please let me know. But it's important that you have a gains roster implemented into the database if you want to use the sponsorship system as well as the in-processing system, because you can almost not use the in-processing system that I'll go over at all without this gains roster. And that pretty much covers the gain roster. Everything here applies as it would in the alpha roster. Section 4, loss roster. Alright, so for loss roster isn't as vital as the gains roster as part of the database relying upon it, but it's still an important part of historical data and stuff like that, and just to help you out with managing your roster and if you want to email it and stuff like that, as well as for outprocessing. So this is a very quick section, there's nothing to go over. Same as the other ones, import your roster how you would. For me, this one is called dummy loss, and you just import it, go back out, and then go back in, and then your information is there. This section doesn't do anything, that will be removed. This section doesn't do anything. However, you cannot delete the information, and that is intentional. It uses a lot of historical data for your outprocessing, and if you were to delete this would greatly mess up your other rosters, which is just a feature to keep you from doing that. So there's an area in which you could archive these. You can see it says archived no. You could change these to yes or -1. We'll fix it to where it says yes for you. You can just put it in there, change it. I believe -1 is yes for the binary code, so there we go. And it would just be only archived losses from then on out to show you who's archived and who's not. We can unfilter it and go back. This also is an experimental feature at this point in this database version that I'm demonstrating to you, and we'll go more from there. However, there's nothing much else to this roster. Section 5, feedback tracking functions. Have used the feedback tracking functions database before? This is very similar, however there's been a huge overhaul to go along in the line with the new system that we have here, and I'll explain some of that. So first things first, the initial feedback and the midterm feedback dates are static for individuals who are supposed to have static dates. So all staff sergeants will have the same exact date in this database, and that should be how it is on your guys' chart. So as you can see here, every staff sergeant has an initial feedback of 2/28/2015 and a midterm feedback of 7/30/2015 according to the dates that were put in here, and this is all taken apart of the last EPR closed out and stuff like that. So no matter who they are or what their situation is that goes off of these static closeout dates. Now, if there was a random scenario to where the individual was not in the static closeout, the database obviously can't detect that, and it will still try to use the static closeout date unless it goes along the lines of an individual who does not meet this, for example, officers. So looking here, you can see we'll go with captain. Our captains will have random dates, and that's basically the old system to where it was 60 days and 180 days, and it times that based off of their EPR closeout. So to understand that. Also, for graphical purposes, I've added this chart. This chart was taken from whoever made it in the Air Force. I really don't know who made it, but here it is. This is exactly how the database charts people's feedback dates. With this information, as you could do before, you could sort it by squadron, and this is just the overview area, and then you could go into doing date range reports, and then we could start off by grabbing some information. I doubt that it'll work with the dates that I just put in. Oh, well, I guess it did. So it looks like that I just did the date range for tech sergeants. And then you could pull a report view if you wanted to print it out like this. Seems like a couple people don't have supervisors. And then you could do whatever you want with this information. Again, you could double click it, and then it prints out the Airman Comprehensive Assessment Tracker with the information in the database, so you could pull those squadron reports and stuff like that. So here, using assign pass clear text, the date range report I did, I could do any tech sergeant and medical support, email that information out, go down the list, and we have 100% notification of our feedback tracking. This is the main thing of this database. This was pulled directly from the previous database that was made, and it was ported right in with the extra added features to help you guys out for managing your feedback tracking, which is a huge program, especially now with the Air Force changing and weighing so heavily on this. There's a lot more you could do, but it ties along with the alpha roster, stuff like that. This area, you shouldn't be able to change anything, and it's a direct take from the alpha roster. And that's pretty much it for the feedback tracking information. All the information is directly along the lines with the Air Force program and the current feedback system that we have. Section 6, Inprocessing and Outprocessing. Okay, so one of the last things to talk about in this database is Inprocessing and Outprocessing. This is one of the few portions of the database that are designed just for the CSS personnel. This has really no interaction with the individuals that you have, meaning that there's no checklist or anything to print out for them, so this does not serve that purpose, but serves as an internal purpose for having all of your staff to be on the same page and remembering what tasks are what. So when you first in-process somebody, you could click the in-processing button, and you will see here that there are in-processing date, which would be today for me, as well as a checklist due date. This checklist due date is designed 30 days from the date that the individual in-processed, as a standard for them to return their checklist to go to the places and come back to the CSS. There are other areas to where you could edit this and change their in-processing due date. However, this is an internal tracking function. So if you wanted to in-process an individual, the in-processing area pulls directly from the gains roster. So as you remember, I had a problem with my little gains roster, so everybody's the same name because I'm lazy. So what you would do is you would click the individual or type in the name of whoever you wanted to in-process, hit enter, and these black boxes areas are pre-filled areas based off of the alpha roster. Makes it incredibly easy for you to where you have all that information. If they somehow had a sponsor in the gains roster that you filled out, that information would be there too. The black areas are not intended for you to edit and probably will not let you. The blue areas are things you need to change. So whatever your tasks are, you could edit these tasks. As for the purposes of this database, it's used off the Yokota system, to where we have here CSS tasks. You change obtain orders, create PIF. It just helps the individual who is in processing, the member inbound to the squadron or the unit, to ensure that they get everything. It makes it really easy for someone to come in there and process somebody and not forget something, because there's a lot of things you could forget and stuff that's unique to your unit you could put. So here we go down the list and fill out what we need to fill out. Also, you could put in various notes on the individual if you felt the need to put a note on them, to where in the future you could go back to this and see this. However, if there is somebody that's for some reason not on your gains roster, this does not limit to the gains roster. You could click here where it says civilian/not listed, and it opens up a new form to where these boxes become blue, and you fill out that information manually. Squadron, you would select the squadrons from what you have. You cannot put a makeshift squadron in. You have to select from what you have on your gains roster or alpha roster as far as squadrons. So all this information can be edited. So once we go out and we in-process our person, it saves. It would add them to our in-processing roster. So let me go ahead and in-process this person real quick. So I put in his information. I only took his orders, and that was it. And he needs to in-process later. And then I save it. It saves. Says something funky. And we go to our in-processing roster, and he's there. So we have the in-processing date, checklist due date. I accidentally in-processed him twice. Where I went and said you could do extensions, it adds to let everybody know the time that they couldn't return the checklist in that date. And this is the checklist return date area. If this area is blank, it will be highlighted yellow to emphasize who is not finished in processing, and you could also click the completed button once they've been processed. And you could email this roster out to squadrons to help manage individuals to in-process your unit. To edit the in-processing functions I showed you earlier, but we could go here to say edit in processing form, and you'll see in the top area it says all titles are 16 characters maximum. That means this is one character. It means 16. So you can't go any higher than that for the purposes of how it will display on your screen. That's the limit. So when you go down here, when you see 20 chars, 40 chars, 70 chars, that's how many characters you could use and how big the task can be. So try to narrow your tasks down into those word limits. And then once you update something, you could change it. If I were to change 2096 CRO rosters to miscellaneous CSS tasks, this would update to where when I go back to in-process, you will see that here. So you could name anything you want. It's just internal for the individuals to properly in-process people. Same goes for outprocessing. Outprocessing has its own tasks and its own system, and it uses the loss roster. It does not use any other roster. Obviously, you wouldn't in-process or out-process someone on another roster. So it has the information here, same as the other screen, with the information being grayed out to where you can't change it. However, you can out-process civilians and individuals who are not on the roster, making it easy to where you could do this. The gaining area should not be modified, or it should not be grayed out, so ignore that color, but these are preset areas as well. So once you out-process somebody, I'll go back to out-processing an individual, test 1, and go back out, and then we go to our out-processing roster, or sorry, loss, don't get it confused, our out-processing roster, and we will see him here. So there's another extra area here that I messed up on, but that's fine. And you could go here and you could see the information in the out-processing screen. And here you could go to add to roster 2 if you want a quick way to get there rather than using the button on the main screen. So this is just a nice way to help you keep track of out-processed individuals, and you could search through it and go back for historical data. This information here uses the loss roster, so that's why the loss roster is being disabled from deleting for historical purposes, to where you could go back and look at this information. And you could also go into the edit form, and same as the Inprocessing roster, you could change the checklist screen to where what you feel that you need to change it for your unit. And that's pretty much it for the system for Inprocessing and Outprocessing. Just a nice way to help you capture individuals who are leaving and coming. This concludes the main portion of the Command Support Feedback Tracking Database version 2.0 demonstration. You can stick around and listen for more key features that might be helpful but are not vital to the success of using this database and all of its features. Once again, I thank you for watching this video, and I hope this database helps you. If you have any questions about it or any suggestions, please feel free to let me know. As far as some features are concerned, the personnel panel has been heavily modified to where it's a lot more convenient, showing all of the individuals you have on your alpha roster. So if I were to look up somebody, you could type in their last name and you look up their first name, and it'll show here on the list their rank, name, and their office symbol, depending on if there's more individuals or not with the same last name. And then you just hit enter. So immediately it pulls up a snapshot of the individual and what they do, their office symbol, as well as some pertinent information that you would see in an alpha roster. However, this is a lot more easy to look at. Also, you will see here, which this person evidently supervises almost everybody because of the same name I have going on. However, it'll be more accurate where this list here shows the individual subordinates as a snapshot of lists of value evaluations and dates, as well as you could be able to print and email this report out so that the individual, if they request so, can get this information. In addition, it shows information about their supervisor. For this individual, there's only one supervisor per person. But for the purposes of this database, it shows this information like this. But you should see one individual, and that's pretty self-explanatory. As far as subordinates, you could double-click subordinates to where you could pull up assessment tracking forms and print it right out on the spot for the individuals. So it just is a panel to make the information about an individual or what they might want to know a bit easier to see and a bit easier to navigate to see who supervises who, and it's just a quick snapshot.